I'm thinking we're live. If that's the case, welcome to the Missouri Freedom Initiative. Today is Thursday, the 5th of May, and it's the year 2022. We have a lot going on this show, gang. For those of you watching us live on YouTube, just give us a 5x5. Let us know if you can hear us okay, and then we'll let the show begin. About 15 minutes of our show, beginning of our show, is going to get you guys updated on SAPA, the Second Amendment Preservation Act in the state of Missouri. And we're also going to talk about H.R. 79 and where we're at with that. And then we're going right into our Aussie news with our Aussie correspondent. We have with us LibertyDownUnder, which is really cool. We haven't talked to him in about 6 months, and he's got a lot of updates to give us about what's going on in Australia. And we're talking specifically everything from the elections to beer flu tyranny to serum tyranny, that sort of thing. And you guys can ask him questions live. A guy who's actually in Australia, boots on the ground in Australia, so he can let us know. Okay, looks like Casey Rich is... Go ahead.
I was going to say a little bit of breaking news here that just got sent from Charles, and it says Missouri and Louisiana just filed suit against Joe Biden, Jen Psaki, and Fauci and top-ranking officials for allegedly colluding with social media companies to suppress freedom of speech under the guise of combating misinformation.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there's photos of the actual lawsuits.
Yep. Gotcha. Yep, we know that's coming. And I expect more states to sign on to that, by the way. That's just beginning. It just got filed today, is my understanding. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, gang. We're going to go ahead and start us out with some information from the Missouri Supreme Court. And we're going to talk about SAPA for just a few moments here, the Second Amendment Preservation Act here in the state of Missouri. It sets us apart from all other 50 states by literally the state of Missouri no longer enforces federal gun laws. Now, this has been taken to court by St. Louis County, Jackson County, and of course the city of St. Louis, and along with the Department of Justice. Now, we actually have a ruling on that from the High Court, from the Missouri Supreme Court. The ruling is we don't even have any information to go on. We're kicking it back down to the lower court. It's going back to Daniel Green's court in Cole County, Missouri. Why is that? Actually, this article, you guys check the description down below. This article covers it real quick. They just don't have anything against the Constitution in their argument that makes sense or has come to fruition at this point. Therefore, there's nothing to appeal to the higher court for at this point. So it's going back down to a lower court, and that's the court that it came from before, where they couldn't find anything wrong with it. And that was appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says you don't have a claim against the 10th Amendment here. So you need to go back down to the lower court and, basically rectify that so you actually have a claim. So that's where this is at. However, the federal government has filed in the DOJ, more specifically, has filed in federal court, but no details on where, when, if, who, when, how. None of that is available as of yet. So we're still being attacked for our SAPA law, but it has been kicked back down to Daniel Green's court in Cole County. So I thought I would cover that for you guys today. And also, let's take a look at a few other things here. I did put down in the description section the actual finding from the Missouri Supreme Court. There's a link down below to what you see on your screen right now, so you guys can go through it. It is a long document, but basically it says, in a nutshell, what I just said. You have no claim that's valid against the 10th Amendment or against the Constitution. So it's bounced back down to the lower court. Okay. We're going to talk about HJR 79 for just a minute as we continue. And in fact, we'll bring in the larger group here. This actually did pass through committee now and has been moved from the formal to the informal calendar. This is HJR 79. Once again, this is about changing the ballot initiative process in the state of Missouri. And what this bill does is basically scoop power from the people of Missouri and bring it to the General Assembly. So we still need to do our phone calls and emails because this could happen at any time because it's on the informal calendar. Now, the visit to Jefferson City that I made, and let's see, Gary Ride was there, and Gary's friend Al was there too, and then Casey Pemberton was there briefly as well. We all went up on Tuesday and we joined forces with Show Me Integrity to go around and talk to senators. Ron was also there working with senators on this as well. Emails and phone calls are still needed. Once again, if you call, they can inject the language from HJR 132, which is actually a fine bill, and it does fit with keeping the freedoms, for the people in Missouri to start initiate and collect petitions for a ballot initiative process. So the list of senators is also down in your description section, which includes names and telephone numbers. And then I just want to get one more plug in before we get started with our good friend from Down Under, the Prepared Homestead Expo, which is coming up at the end of this month. Guys, this is only literally about 21 days away. May 26th, it starts at 8 a.m. on a Thursday, and it ends May 27th at 4 p.m. Our good friend Travis is hosting this, and we will be there. There'll be lots of folks there. In fact, a director from the Gun Owners of America will be there. So something to consider going to. Okay, if I missed anything, you guys can let me know real quick on what I just covered before we get into our Aussie news. Casey, Rich, do you have anything?
Nope, I'm ready to go.
Okay, Caleb, did I miss anything on the Supreme Court side or anything with 79 that you can think of?
Not that I can think of, other than it's a regular dumpster fire. But hey.
Yeah, well, what in the Missouri legislature isn't a dumpster fire, really?
What in this world isn't a dumpster fire anymore?
Okay, and John, is there anything you could think of along those two lines?
No, nothing that I can think of.
Okay, gotcha.
So you know what? Who voted that out of committee and who didn't?
I didn't pay attention to that. Actually, that was yesterday that happened.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at the voting record again. It doesn't look like it just came out of committee though. It's
There are senators that are more important. I don't want to say more important to contact than others. It's important to contact all of them, of course. So call your senator. But Onder, Bratton are very important people to contact because they're difficult to get their names, or I'm sorry, their minds changed on this issue. They'd be very important people to get to see that the language in 132 is better for the citizens of Missouri, the residents of Missouri.
It's been placed on informal calendar in the Senate. So.
Yep. So, okay, all right. Without further ado, then let's bring in our friend from Australia, Liberty Down Under. We've had him on before. It was roughly about 6 months ago. We're going to be talking about the tyranny that's going on in Australia, but we're going to use our code words today because YouTube is probably still sensitive to this stuff, so we'll be saying beer flu and serum and things of that nature, face diapers, things of that nature. I think you guys know what we're talking about, but the algorithms just don't seem to catch on to these things, so we'll continue using them. I want to say hello to everyone on YouTube, and by the way, while we're chatting with our friend here, any questions, throw them in the YouTube chat. We'll make sure that he gets those questions so he can answer them for you. So welcome, Liberty. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me back on.
It's going okay. We're worried about you guys in Australia all the time. You guys have a huge election coming up. Go ahead.
Yeah, 15 days to the election.
15.
I mean, it seems... I mean, it is a pretty short election campaign. 6 weeks compared to you guys, like 18, 20 months. So only 6 weeks in the campaign. We're 2/3 of the way through, basically.
Okay, and let's start there then. Does the Conservative Party in Australia, are they kind of against the beer flu tyranny? Are they half and half? Are they? What would you describe them as? Do you have a party there that is against beer flu tyranny? Let's start there.
So our Conservative Party is the Liberal Party.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the naming too. It's meant to be the old school Liberals. They're not. They're definitely not old school Liberals. They claim to be anti-mandate. The federal government, which is Liberal, said they're anti-mandate. They're not going to impose any vaccine mandates. instead they gave it to the court, they gave it to the states, and all the states said, you know, we're going to put in place mandates, and that includes New South Wales, which is run by the Liberal National parties in a coalition government, and they also imposed vaccine mandates. So even though the Liberal Party claims to be anti-mandate, they aren't really in practice.
Okay.
So there's not any major party that stands up against vaccine mandates. It falls to your minor parties to deal with it.
Okay. So when you say the Conservative Party there is liberal, are you kind of like the Liberal Party is here in America? That's what they would consider, conservative out there, kind of?
The Conservatives over here are to the left of the GOP for you guys.
Okay, left of the GOP. Okay, gotcha. All right. That actually...
So your Conservatives would be called hard right over here, basically.
Okay, hard right. Gotcha. Where we consider them, like lukewarm milquetoast, kind of, actually left of center. That's, but then again, with our organization, we're not right and left, we're just with the Constitution. Unfortunately, that leaves us very, very far right compared to, a lot of people in politics today, as we are closer to, basically libertarianism, that sort of thing. So I think that would be fair to say for your mentality as well. You just want the people to be free. You want them to have their God-given rights, their natural rights, and you want the tyranny to go away. Is that, pretty much what your position is?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Before we get into election, go ahead.
I was going to say, by comparison between the U.S., like for example, particularly Missouri, compared to there, we look like anarchists compared to.
Yeah, I imagine we do. Yeah, well, us gun-toting, having, like for instance, what's really catching on in the United States right now, we got done in 2016, is permitless carry, or we also call constitutional carry, which means you can carry a gun without any documentation whatsoever. You don't have to go get, a permit from the government to do so. So anyone can carry. So and that's actually and some people in other cultures, like a friend of mine in England says, that's just frightening. That's just frightening to think about, that you go into a restaurant and you don't know who's carrying a gun. And I said, actually, for me, that's extremely comforting. That actually makes me feel good, because if there's a bad guy with a gun, there's definitely going to be lots of good guys with guns there too. So problems can get.
You're a red state, right, in Missouri?
Yes, we are.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's very different to here. When you're talking about guns, you guys are talking about SAPA. We've got nothing like that over here.
Yeah.
Our Liberal Party is responsible for the gun control in the first place.
You could have you guys, from my understanding, you guys could have a gel blaster down there that's shaped like a phallus of sorts. And then they would have to be registered with the police department. I saw a YouTube video. Someone actually ordered one shaped like that down in Australia, took it to the police department, had to have it registered as a firearm.
Yeah, so in South Australia, you have to in fact, with Nerf guns in South Australia, you have to get those registered as firearms because some of them have the same mechanisms for firing as gel blasters do, and they're illegal. So therefore, the Nerf guns have to be taken to the police and get registered as firearms to be able to own them.
Wow.
And again, that was a conservative state until the last election down there. So again, our conservatives are horrible on guns. Worse than you guys.
What? You did? Let me get this straight, because I can feel my blood pressure rising. Did you say Nerf gun?
Nerf guns, yeah.
What? Oh,
It's-
okay.
It's a different world over there.
It's their government is
Jesus.
pathetic.
I know, but Nerf. What are you gonna kill somebody with a piece of foam? Jeez. Okay. All right.
Back in March of this year, the Western Australia Police Commissioner released a map of the locations of all gun owners in the state. He released their locations publicly. He complained that 12 people in the entire state own military-grade sniper rifles, and therefore that's grants more gun control.
Oh.
I print off AR-15 receivers on a printer at my house on the regular.
Which is also legal over here as well. In New South Wales, again, a liberal state, New South Wales, it's illegal to own information that can be used to 3D print firearms.
Oh,
Oh God.
oh.
That
Some of
is,
y'all need to stop. Y'all need to kind of unionize and refuse to cooperate, outnumber their enforcement capability, and then respond
unfo-
accordingly when they try to stop you.
well, unfortunately, we're using your tanks, so like all our firearms
Well,
and everything comes
so
from the
so
US.
so if you're talking about tanks like Abrams,
Yeah.
those aren't hard to stop.
No.
They're really not hard to stop. You make it you set off a sensor that makes it look like there's an engine fire, and they have to climb out, and then they have a problem.
yeah. Let me ask you some questions here, and going to switch up the subject just a little bit. Last time we talked to you, we knew that there was a lot of external pressure for you and your family to become serumized in the way of basically financial retribution to the tune of like $68 a day per person. Can we ask if that's okay? Can we ask about your family status on this? Are you guys okay out there?
Yes. We're fine, but a lot of families aren't. In Victoria last week laid off 2,500 teachers for not getting the booster.
Okay. So it didn't get to the point where your family had to succumb to that pressure then?
No, they're vaccinated as well.
Okay. So
Most Australians, the vast majority of Australians have the vaccine.
my understanding
Because
currently, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, most Australians did get at least the first 2 shots
Yep.
of the vaccine because of the restrictions put in place.
Okay.
Like,
87% is what we hear here in America. Does that sound accurate to what you're hearing there in Australia? You have 80% vaccinated?
It'd probably be a bit more than that.
Okay.
I'd say around 10% unvaxxed makes sense, probably even less.
Okay. All right. So, how about, okay, so did you have to go get a serum? Did you have to partake in that? If you don't mind my asking.
Unfortunately.
You did?
Yeah, well, it was basically, if I didn't, I'd lose my job. When we get into university at the time, that was the discussion. You can't get into university if you're unvaxxed. Medical care. So I was going through some serious mental health issues, and I couldn't get treatment for that. So there's a whole variety of personal pressures that basically I didn't really have much of a choice, unfortunately. But haven't got the booster yet. So
Okay.
unfortunately, I had to get 2 doses. But I waited until after the mandate. But I'm only like 20, so I don't have any funds saved up or anything like that. So
Yep.
if I didn't have anything to fall back on.
Yeah, I understand. I'm sorry to hear that. I knew the pressure was enormous out there. In fact, the stories that we were following were people being ripped out of their homes, being put into these camps of these temporary housing units where they weren't allowed to leave. They even said if you cross over a yellow line over the porch on this little tiny home we have for you in the camp, there's a $5,000 fine. I mean, it's just really, really weird stuff like that going on. I imagine a lot of those people actually lost their homes. And it was over, of course, something as simple as, I'm not going to get this vaccine. And, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
this serum. And have you heard any stories about that? Are people suing the government over that? Do they have any recourse if they've lost their homes?
People have tried and failed to get compensation. There's been multiple cases brought against the government, and they've all failed so far.
Wow.
To get compensation or anything like that.
Okay.
One thing about
Because
government,
it's all
care.
legal. It's all like the way that it's all set up to make it all legal. For example, in Victoria, the Equal Opportunity Act of 2010 authorizes discrimination by the government. So private citizens can't discriminate, but the government can. And so then they passed the pandemic bill, which was last year, and that allowed the government to basically target groups of people for not getting the vaccine, and that was authorized by the Equal Opportunity Act, which legalized discrimination by the government. So it's all set up legally. So you can't challenge it legally because it's all set up perfectly already by them. It's been set up well advanced. Legally, yes. Air quotes.
Big old air quotes. Yeah.
Like for example, I like this example. Back in as early as the 1920s, the High Court said that the words "absolutely free" in the Constitution do not mean absolutely free. So Section 92 allows for says quote absolutely free for freedom of trade and commerce and interstate interactions. So travel that basically means trade, commerce, and travel should be quote absolutely free. And the courts have said, you know what that means? There are restrictions allowed by absolutely free, because if you don't, there's anarchy, and we can't have that. So therefore, we can put restrictions in place. So it's been set up for over a century to put all these controls in place, and it's completely legal. So you can't challenge it in the courts because it's all legally sound.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah. It's funny because oh God, what's the word I'm looking for? I lost my train of thought there. I was gonna say something, I
I'm
don't
still
remember what it was.
thinking about the impending Nerf gun revolution that's going to happen out there. Yeah. So, we'll see what that looks like. B&H, go ahead.
All I can say is use what you got, whatever you still got, and then commandeer some of theirs.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's about as far as we can probably take it on, as far as the algorithms go.
Yes.
B&H has a very
Stay on
interesting
after the show for a bit.
Yeah. B&H has a very interesting question. I'm going to try and ask it in an interesting way. But he's wondering if there's do-it-yourself, kits at home, pew pew. Is that a common thing in Australia? Here in America, they refer to it as, ghost, and then inject the other word, ghost.
Yeah.
So at any rate, is that a thing in Australia? Are people looking into things like this?
Not really, no. Again, most people are happy with it. Obviously, the left supports gun control, and mainstream conservatives support gun control, or at least did until COVID, when they changed their narrative and supported owning firearms. But that's only changed because the left supports mandates, so the right says we should have the right to own guns. But that'll change that'll change if they want it to change, because it's again, it's all their fault. The conservatives are the reason why we have the gun control in the first place. And you've got to remember as well, we're an island nation, so we can't get guns across the Mexican border or anything like that. So it's got to come in through ports and airports, and those are pretty, like, if you talk to tourists who come to Australia, they'll say that the restrictions at our ports and airports are horrible. They're really, really strict. Like we're talking like TSA level stuff in the US. In fact, it's even worse to bringing in like plant goods and that's what organics and that sort of stuff. It's very rigorous. So the government checks everything that comes into the country. And as I said, again, in some states you can't even 3D print or own information that can be used to 3D print firearms legally. So there's not many unregistered firearms in the country. There are some, but they're not ghost guns or 3D printed firearms.
Well, the only thing I can say about this situation is, and no, YouTube, I do not endorse any of this. When it came to the IRA, an island nation that was locked off from the rest of the world and surrounded by the British Navy, they were able to get right in there with MG42s and everything else. It's always possible. There's always a way.
And I do have a bit of advice for you, Liberty, and that is if you have the chance to, there's a guy by the name of Eric Holder. If you get him into your government, I guarantee you can get guns in and out of the Australian, borders pretty easily, actually.
Oh, no, Fast and Furious. Oh,
yeah. So I'm making fun of someone who worked in the Obama administration that was responsible for a scandal referred to as Fast and Furious. There were guns going back and forth through the Mexican border. Those guns were used to shoot and kill American border agents, and it was never prosecuted. That's oddly enough. But at any rate, that was the joke I was referring to.
Yeah, it was a CIA FBI run thing that ran a bunch of surplus guns over the border and that just handed them off to the cartels.
Yep. Triple T Tony says, I don't think there's a company in the world that would ship gun parts to Australia. And you may be right on that. I mean, there's probably a really stiff fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, there is. It's very strict. We've got some of the worst gun control, and by worst I mean strictest gun control laws out there, at a federal and at a state level. As I said, owning 12 firearms that are military-grade sniper rifles in the entire state grants more gun control. Job losses are illegal in most states. Paintball is illegal in some states. Again, the Nerf guns thing. So really rigorous gun control.
Mm. Yeah. Let's see, John. Did you want to mention something? Go ahead. John's blown away here. He's got a question percolating. I promise you. I know the look on his face.
No, I don't know what to say.
There's a lot more I can say, but we have to wait till after we're done and live.
But it just, it's not. Do people just never mind, because everything I want to say right now is not radio friendly. Because you can't own a paintball gun. Yes, because I might murder you with a paintball.
But see, they want to deny you the training capability, tactical training, and the operation procedures of any kind of ability to maneuver with a thing that discharges a projectile.
Oh.
Now,
I got a question, Pat.
Sure, go ahead.
What's the crime rate like in your area? You know, is there higher crime rate, or is there still just as much violence, but it's with knives or baseball bats? Or, you know, is there any correlation between not having any guns at all versus, you know, do you guys have no crime?
No, we still have crime.
Yeah, oh, you're kidding me. You still have crime. Well, taking away the guns was supposed to stop that. Holy crap. It didn't work, did it?
The left complains, right, that, you know, we have more firearms now than we did before gun controls brought in. 3.5 million firearms. So therefore, they say we need more gun control. So that's I think that is more guns than they had before the Port Arthur massacre, 1996, which led to the gun control in the first place. But that's that 3.5 million firearms figure. You got to remember as well that that's the population has increased by 7 million since 1996. So you had 18 million back then, 25 million now. So that's 7 million. That's almost a third of the population, basically. So the proportion of Australians who own guns by a gun license has dropped by half. The proportion of households that own firearms has dropped by 3/4. So although there are more firearms, they only own people who already own firearms beforehand. So yeah, more guns, but they're weaker guns, like lesser in caliber and round capacity and that sort of stuff. And it's basically just owned by existing firearm owners. There aren't many young people who own firearms either.
Yeah.
Well, at Triple T, Tony, of course, says, tell Australians the same thing everyone told me when I lived in New York. Move to another state. That is an option for you now. You know, you guys do have that ability at this point, don't you, to be able to move out of Australia and move to a different country?
Yes,
Yep.
we can do that now, fortunately. The
And-
government decides to be benevolent enough to give us that travel right back.
Yep. Well, the original idea, when we talked to you originally, was Canada, because they hadn't gone quite as draconian as Australia did, but now they have. And they had very serious lock. You know, Trudeau, showed everyone his true colors in large fashion, by the way. I mean, it had to be worldwide news. I mean, it was all over the news here. Well, the alternative news, to be more specific. The mainstream didn't carry his tyranny, oddly enough.
Well, if you decide to move to the States, come here to Missouri.
Yep. You said 3.5 million firearms. Here's a statistic. You've heard of Kansas City? It's a big city in Missouri. I'll bet you there's way more than 3.5 million firearms in Kansas City. Way more than that, actually. In fact, I would be willing to bet at least 7 to 8 million firearms in Kansas City alone.
Yeah, you know what's funny about that? It's only 500,000 people in Kansas City.
Yep.
The average gun owner in Missouri probably has about 3 or 4. I know I got 7.
At least.
Yeah, at least. I know people that never mind.
7 that need to
I
be
know.
named
I know
about.
people. That's all I had to say, I think.
I'd have to go count mine first just to know for sure.
Yep.
Man, I can't believe you guys still have guns. Mine are at the bottom of the lake after a boat accident.
Oh yeah. Sorry about that boating accident, Robert. I heard about
Robert.
Sad.
Yeah.
Robert, I didn't lose shit.
Okay.
So, how much money would it cost this man here to pack up a bunch of belongings and get to the States? How much money would that involve? how much money would be involved in order to get this man from the dictatorship of Australia to a somewhat free Missouri? How much money would be involved there? I'm just saying, I bet we could raise the funds. I
Yeah.
bet we could.
Probably.
Yeah.
I bet we could do it.
Yep. It's entirely possible. I mean, that's, basically something where Liberty would have to let us know he's interested in doing such a thing. And, basically, I think, this is only the second time we've talked to you, man, but I'm telling you, if you ever somehow magically find yourself whisked away to the magical and place of Missouri, and you get to, shoot an AR-15, an AR-10, you get to shoot a 9
I'll train you up,
millimeter.
man.
I think you would enjoy that. I just have this weird feeling that you would actually enjoy the sound of freedom.
And a 1911 sounds really good first thing in the morning. Let me
Yep.
tell you, brother.
Yep.
Even if you don't move to Missouri, the next state over, Kansas, yeah, they got a Democrat governor, but she's like a gun-owning Democrat to an extent, and then the entire legislature is like solid red.
Yep. And
So,
Tennessee's
they-
a nice place too.
Yeah, Kansas does have a version of SAPA, and the only place even though it doesn't have teeth, the only place they really bother enforcing anything is in like Overland Park and those gross areas. You go out in the middle of nowhere, they just don't care.
Yep. Okay, I'll tell you what, if you don't mind, let's go ahead and shift back to elections for Australia. I know that you're paying very close attention to that, and I'm curious, help us with the layout here before we start on that side. How many people in politics in general there are talking about preventing beer flu mandates on the level that you guys experienced in the last year from happening again? Are there any people running for office that are actually expressing that idea openly?
Yes, but most of the right-wing minor parties are anti-mandate. Minor parties here have more influence than they do in the US because we have preferential voting. So, plus also, we have 12 senators per state, not 2. So each state has 12 senators, and the 2 territories have 2 each. So 76 all up. And for example, the Greens Party has 9 senators. So that's 12% of the senators are Greens. So minor parties have a lot more influence over here than they do in the US. But it's only the right-wing minors that are anti-mandate in any way. The right, however, here is a lot more disunited than the left is. The left is split into mainly Labor, which is the Democrats in Australia, and the Greens, the two big left-wing parties. Whereas the right is split between the Liberal Party, which is the biggest conservative party, then the National Party, which is in a coalition with the Liberal Party. Liberals are supposedly more free market urban, whereas Nationals are agrarian rural. And then you've got a few right-wing minorities like United Australia Party, One Nation, the Liberal Democrats, which are a version of the LP. So you've got a few right-wing parties that are anti-mandate, but they're a lot more disunited than the left is. So the left can put in these mandates because they've got more unity, I guess, in their parties.
Okay, so keeping all that in mind, first of all, I'm going to ask you several questions. Before I do, a lot of people think I am a cynic, but I am not. I'm a pragmatist. And I'm going to be asking you questions along these lines because we can't trust certain things in America. One thing we know we can't trust are the national polls. They seem to be very skewed here. But what are the polls showing right now in Australia? First of all, do you trust the polls? Secondly, what are they telling you right now as far as who's more likely to win elections? Which parties? I mean, lockdown parties or not lockdown parties?
Well, I guess it's the second question first.
Okay.
It'll be the lockdown parties that win the election either way. It'll be either the Liberal National Coalition or the Labor. Either of those will form government, and so then we'll still have support for the mandate. So how the government works over here is there's 151 MPs, members of Parliament in the lower house, House of Reps, and the party that has the majority in the lower house forms government as the Prime Minister. So currently, you need 76 to form government, but the LNP, Liberal National Coalition, has 75. So they need one more seat to form. They're currently a minority government, So the way it works is that it's based on who can control spending bills. So the idea is that the party in government can pass spending bills to the lower house, because the Senate can only reject or accept spending bills, but the lower house can create spending bills.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is that the party that forms government can, allow the government spending to continue, so you don't have government shutdowns like the US has. So 75, the LNP has 75, Labor has 68. So neither can form government. So it's most like what the polls are saying, it'll probably be Labor that wins the election. So they need 8 more seats to win the election, which is probably likely. The Liberal Party, the LNP, will lose the election. There's no doubt about that. But the question is, will Labor win enough seats to form government, or will you end up with what's called a hung parliament, which is when the minor parties and independents control the balance of power? So right now, from memory, I think there are 8 independents and minor parties in the lower house. And so currently they control the balance of power. So the major parties have to work with either side. With the major parties have to work with the minor parties to get anything passed right now in the lower house. So what I'm expecting is a hung parliament where Labor wins seats, but they don't win enough to form government in their own right. At which point they'll have to work with the independents, who are more left wing, or the minor parties which are more right wing.
Okay.
So you've got three right-wing minor parties in the lower house, but the independents, there are 4 independents, and they're all left-wing.
Okay, so basically that's where, basically the hopes are being pinned right now, is a hung parliament where the smaller parties that are anti-beer flu lockdown parties have more influence within, basically the government of Australia.
Yes. Having said that, it's not likely. We've had, I think, 7 elections since COVID started, and in Queensland, in Western Australia, and South Australia, Labor picked up seats. They had almost a 20% swing in the upper house in Western Australia, for example. And I think 17% overall. So massive swing in Western Australia, and that's the state that's had the worst. They've had the strongest borders during COVID. So 3 states went Labor. Northern Territory, Labor had a smaller majority, but they still kept government. ACT, which is our version of DC, the Greens picked up seats there, and then in Tasmania, nothing changed. So across the board, Labor tends to be winning with their stronger COVID mandates. So it looks like, I'm hoping a hung parliament, but our Labor government is looking more and more likely.
Okay, I'm going to bring in another question now, and it's a pragmatist question. And it's the same thing Triple T said, and it's what I had mentioned to you right before we started the show. Do they cheat in Australian elections like they do in America's elections? Is there fraud within the election process? Has it ever been investigated, exposed, or at least mentioned? Or or maybe we're wrong, and maybe there is no fraud in the elections over there like we have here. What are your thoughts on that?
There's not much fraud, but it's because we have mandatory voting, so it's a lot easier.
Okay,
so voting over here, we are the only Western democracy to have mandatory voting for all people that is enforced.
So you have a day off from work to go vote, sort of thing?
The elections are always held on a Saturday.
Oh, Saturday.
That way everyone's free.
Okay.
So this year it's May 21st, which is it's always a Saturday for all states, territories, federal. It's always election day is always a Saturday. So we have mandatory voting here, which means that I think Brazil has mandatory voting, but only until you're 70, 75, and that's no longer mandatory. And in Belgium they have it, but it's not enforced. So we're the only Western democracy to have voting mandated by government and enforced with fines. So it's a lot easier to deal with election fraud because it's mandatory. So they can keep track of everyone who votes, and if there are more votes than voters, then you know that there obviously is fraud. Because basically everyone votes.
Yeah, we had a lot more votes than voters here too, because it's just registration of voters, and we had a lot more. How many more did you say, Patrick?
I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
How many more voters were there than registered voters?
Well, it's ambiguous, and there's different sources. But right now, it's 13 million more votes in the United States than there are registered voters, is what they're saying. So, but at the same time, I was giving the statistic to a colleague last night, and he was saying no, the current information is 86% of all registered voters voted in the last election. But at the same time, they didn't include the mail-in ballots for that, at least in several states. That's where the fraud was for us, Liberty. It was the mail-in ballots. I meant the briefcases. I'm sorry, not briefcases, suitcases full of ballots that you saw them
Truckloads.
wheeling out. After they'd closed up the counting for the night, and then they kept all the conservative observers out of those areas while they were literally hefting, hundreds of thousands of votes in one state alone out of suitcases and putting them up on the table that were not registered ballots. And so they affected the election in certain states that way. There was other ways too. Virginia had, I believe it was 130,000 dead people vote in the election. And this is a constant problem here in America is, basically since we can't seem to stop the dead people from voting, we do need to open a dialogue with the undead and find out what their motivations are, why they're voting. But also, too, I think it's important that we actually have a rule that they come into, the polls to vote rather than voting by mail, which is how dead people always vote in America. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's my dry sense of humor, but I'm not joking about how many dead people vote in America every year. That part I'm not joking about. It's a serious problem here. Some states worse than others.
Way too many dead people voted last time. I'm just a little suspicious. So.
Yep.
It's usually not that many.
Do you guys have voting by phone over there?
No, we do not have that. We have several kinds of mail-in ballots, and then of course voting in person. So, in other words, go ahead.
They're supposed to be signature verified, but some states went out of their way.
Supposed to be.
Yeah, supposed to be, but some states went out of their way to make it to where, one person can go around and collect them and then sign them. So that's where your hole comes in for all those mail-in ballots.
Yeah.
So we
go ahead.
In Australia, we also have voting by phone. So for the visually impaired, they can call up, they can call us the certain number, and then place their vote over the phone if need be. And I've had people complain about that being election fraud. I'm not going to comment on that. We also have Dominion being involved in vote counting as well over here.
Oh God, those.
2020 we had Dominion again. Just said without any comment, but that's what we have in Australia right now for the election system.
The Dominion voting systems.
Yep.
Having said that, if you have excess votes, there'll be questions asked. In the past, we've had election results delayed because there's been inconsistencies with the vote count. Even like 500,000 more votes than voters, you have alarm bells going off because everyone's registered to vote because it's mandatory. So you're not going to have extra votes. If you have election fraud, it'll be votes being changed, not extra ballots being cast, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what those Dominion machines do, though.
Yep. And plus, they're connected to the internet, so they can be easily hacked. At least the tabulation machines are. I'm not sure about the individual voting machines, but I do believe they're wireless, so they can talk to a wireless network. So that's another problem with the voting machines we have here. And by the way, the cure for this problem is clearly to get rid of anything analog, anything, punch, and just go completely with wireless electronic voting machines, because that's what they keep doing here in America. It's terrible. And I don't mean to keep talking about what's going on here in America. I'm curious about Australia, and voting by phone is interesting. I never even heard of that concept before. But so is that a common one? Do a lot of people vote by phone? And by that, I'm assuming a touch-tone phone or a smartphone, that sort of thing. Can you do it digitally by phone there as well?
I don't believe so. I'm not familiar with I don't know too much about voting by phone.
How does it identify you on the phone? Do you have to put in like the equivalent of a social security number or something?
It'd be giving your details, and I presume because we have strong registering system over here for voters. So with electoral rolls, so if someone's voted twice, they get their name crossed off two different rolls, and there's a problem. or if someone's gone under a false name, you can work that out probably. But you can't cast a vote twice or anything like that over here. So it is a bit more stringent.
That's even more. That's even more conniving, though, just because they can give the perfect illusion that there is an equal voting system, but then it's all digital, so it's real easy to change that.
Yeah, that'd be a concern, I guess. And Triple T Tony says voting on the phone like American Idol, like they used to do on that TV show, that reality show. I suppose Congress would love that, says Latanya. Yeah, I'm sure they would actually. Someone here agreed. Is Triple T Tony said 20 million. I think he might be referring to 20 million dead people voted in the United States in the 2020 election. So an awful lot of the undead actually did come out, and that's another thing. We have to figure out how they get out the vote like that. I mean, registering dead voters in itself is a difficult thing to do, but getting them to cast their ballots, consistently. The weird part about dead voters is, and maybe you can help us figure this out, they tend to vote Democrat, and we're not really 100% sure why. We don't know their motivations. But they tend to vote Democrat here in America for some reason. So, it really comes down to finding out what motivates them. Maybe they want,
necromancy.
Republicans better start learning.
Yeah, exactly. They could want more comfortable coffins or something. We don't know.
For the longest time around here, it became a regular meme that would come across, like when someone would die, it would say, "Oh, looks like they're going to vote Democrat now."
Well, Liberty, I know you mentioned earlier you're 20 years old. And you mentioned that, the move away from a democracy, or at least a citizen-based, let's just say representative government, has been 100 years. But in your lifetime, you've seen a lot of the power slip away from the people. I know you have, because I've been following Australian politics for 20 years. About 20 years exactly. And a little more than that. I started following it. Remember when I was telling you in the last time we had you on, when I saw the videos of the guns being taken away from the Australians, the buybacks, and then it was mandatory after the buy. Yep. So you have seen a lot of tyranny in your lifetime. What are your hopes or plans? Is there a movement maybe to start restoring some of that power, taking it back from your government and giving it back to the people? Is there a big movement for that?
There is, but I don't believe they're genuine in that movement. It's all politicians saying that as well. So politicians are saying that, vote for me and I'll give the power back to the people. So I don't believe them. People do. A lot of people who are anti-mandate do believe these politicians are genuine, but I can't trust them being genuine because we've seen them in the past, as you said, in the last 20 odd years we've seen a lot of tyranny in the last 20 odd years. One of the Queensland's former premier, which is our version of the governor, 2013 to 2015, Campbell Newman was Liberal. He formed a record majority government in Queensland. We're unicameral, so no upper house, just a lower house here. And then his government was so unpopular, right, that they were voted out in after one term. So a record majority to a landslide Labor election. The left hated him, of course. The moderates didn't like him, and then even on liberty issues, which he claims to stand for, he was hopeless. He brought in more guns for the police, militarized the police. He brought in mandatory minimum sentences for for owning firearms illegally. He outlawed bikers, and he claims that, and he's now the lead Senate candidate in Queensland for the Lib Dems, which is our Libertarian Party. So he's gone from that tyranny to being championed as a savior for liberty. And people ask me, why are you so skeptical? I'm like, well, you're running with this guy. Like, he's in my state, and I can't vote for him because I've seen what he did when he was in office as the premier. He says he's different. He says he's different now. Well, there's no proof of him being different. Do you want to really risk having him when he says he's now pro-drug? Again, where's the proof? Has he bought any pro-drug, pro-marijuana? Because has he gone and spoken at events for that? Has he given to organizations that are legalizing weed. Nope, he just says he is. So we can trust his word, apparently. Despite all he's done in the past, all the precedent there says he's anti-liberty. He claims to be a libertarian, and he gets support from the Lib Dems as being one of the leading libertarians in Australia. So, I'm very skeptical of
That has
people
got
who are in government saying they'll give us back our freedoms, because we know what government's like. I doubt they'll give us back.
that is the biggest Trojan horse, and oh God.
It is, and it's a very stark reality the Aussies have to deal with. Unfortunately, is that the politicians will lie to get in office, and they'll say exactly what people want to hear. They get in office, nothing changes, and that's why I'm going to be asking my next question. Actually, I'm going to ask a quick question here because it was asked, and I don't remember the exact year. I think it was 1997. When were the guns taken in Australia? 97. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's when, like I said, gang, that's when I first started watching Australian politics. I mean, I couldn't believe what I was seeing at the time. And it looked like the people voluntarily were okay with it, and that's what it looked like from the videos I saw. I'm trying to remember. It's 25 years ago, but
yes.
So let me ask you this then, and I'm going to ask probably in a way that seems kind of weird, but it's an algorithm thing. We have seen how tyrannical law enforcement can be in Australia. We've seen plenty of videos during the beer flu, how bad they can actually get. Is there a movement for non-compliance? Is there, or has the threat of being beat up by a law enforcement officer, is that enough for most people? What's the general feeling on that? And answer in any way you feel is appropriate for algorithms.
Well, those protests are no longer the narrative of right-wing minor parties, so therefore the non-compliance in protests is no longer important because those parties have moved on from that. So therefore, the right-wing anti-mandate narrative has changed, and we're no longer doing protests or anything like that. Really, there's a couple of areas where they do, but the stuff we saw last year basically died off to a large extent. A couple of states still have it. Western Australia still has it because they've got that hard border, as I said. People are having to get in by going through Bali to get into Western Australia. It was that hard at one point to get into the States. So there are a few of those protests, but by and large, it's died off because it doesn't suit the liberty-minded parties, supposedly. That's the thing. Like you've got three, as I said, you have three parties: One Nation, United Australia Party, and the Lib Dems, who are all supposedly pro-liberty. But then their policies again, do they really line up, and then in practice and stuff like that? What again? They say they're pro-liberty, but that's just their word against nothing. So I'm looking to see this in practice, and what we've seen from those parties so far is that they aren't pro-liberty. For example, when it comes to the vaccine mandates and that sort of stuff, Pauline Hanson, leader of One Nation, she's a senator as well. She went to some of the protests and then told the people to pack it up. So when we had those trucker convoy protests, apparently that were meant to be happening, she went to one of those protests and then said, let's pack it up and go home, and they did. So they were there for like maybe 2 hours at best, and then they went home because she said, let's go home. So these supposedly liberty-minded parties, who are meant to be the anti-mandate, leading the anti-mandate charge, not really anti-mandate. Only when it suits them to be anti-mandate. Only when it suits them to be pro-liberty.
Oh, God. So what I see here is that those people that are politically connected pulled a psyop to make people feel like they're doing something.
Yep. Again, they're going back to the guns again. UAP, United Australia Party, they're apparently pro-gun, but history says otherwise. In 2013 or 2014, in Queensland, they proposed a bill to ban owning information that can be used to 3D print firearms. Fortunately, it lapsed, wasn't passed. But that was proposed by the UAP. It's supposedly a pro-liberty party who tried to take away gun rights in Queensland. They've also want to get rid of states. So they're a pro-liberty party that wants to have power only in the hands of the federal government, no state governments, and they're also wanting to get rid of student debt.
We have that one going on here too.
But they're a right-wing minor party. They're meant to be right-wing, but they're not.
Yep. Evidently not. They might be fibbing.
Oh,
And I
There are
hate
right
this.
wing parties saying get rid of student debt. And again, like student debt here goes through the government, so it's a no interest loan from the government. So you can pay it back easily. There's no interest on it. It comes from the government. They give you the loan to get through uni if you're eligible, and then you pay that back to the government. So the system as it is works right now pretty well. And they're saying, let's get rid of that student debt altogether, all for good. And it's the exact same situation we're seeing with libertarians, with Democrats and libertarians in America that stance on student debt. We're seeing a bit of that over here. The libertarians and the other parties are opposed to it, but that party themselves, they aren't opposed. They support it. I know candidates from that party who aren't happy with it, but it's party lines, so they can't challenge it.
Triple T Tony says something here, and we could talk about that, at least dance around it just a little bit. He says, I believe Australia is too far gone, and corruption has too much of a stranglehold to bring back freedom with politics. There's only one logical outcome. And but at the same time, when we talked about 6 months ago, you talked about the will of the people to be free is not really there. I mean, they seem to be okay in subjugation. Do you still see it that way?
Yeah.
Okay. The vast majority.
All the states that had vaccine mandates are now dropping them slowly. Not completely. As I said, Victoria just suspended 2,500 teachers for not getting the booster. But surprisingly, all these states that had their vaccine mandates have eased them right before the election. Queensland dropped their vaccine mandate on April 14th. Literally, April 14th is right before Easter. That's Thursday. Easter Thursday. The long weekend starts on that Friday. So the day before Easter, they drop the mandates. People will vote for them.
Yep. Gotcha.
Mhm.
Yep. Well, and did it work?
They will win votes. The thing is, as I said, neither party, the Labor nor the LNP, has a majority in the lower house. However, Queensland is the reason why the LNP won the last election in 2019, was because it swung Liberal against the polling. The polling said it wouldn't. The polling said it would be strong for Labor, and it swung against the Labor voted Liberal. So those votes were often marginal seats. So Labor wants to try and win back those seats. So by easing the mandates, they can then win votes back, because it's safe to do so now. It's now their scientists say it's now safe to ease the mandate. So therefore they'll ease the mandate now, and they'll put it back in place afterwards again, because the mandates they're still going to be around for the rest of this year. As I said before the show, we've got Victoria up for their election in November of this year. Sent them as the midterms for you guys. And there'll still be a COVID thing, because that's Dan Andrews, the guy, all the protests are being against him. So COVID will still be a big thing then. So it's going to be around for at least the next, 6 months? 6-7 months, they're going to have a list. And then it's summer, so they'll bring in the mandates for that probably as well, because we had an outbreak last summer.
Oh,
We'll see
yeah.
mandates come back then as well.
How about the numbers there? I'm going to ask you a couple of kind of technical, maybe medical questions as far as your knowledge is on this area. What about people going to hospitals in Australia? Now, is that still happening? With the large vaccination status, you would think that you guys would be beer flu free over there. Yet they're still having...
I think so.
Yeah, and so you would think so. And also, you share a singular distinction with one other nation, and that's Israel, for being the most highly serumized countries in the world. Yet there's still these outbreaks and people going to the hospital. And
We all know what those are.
Yeah, I know what those are, but we're working with algorithms here.
Well, I'm just pointing out. We all know what those are.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm saying.
There was a few people died in their 50s from heart attacks. A few celebrities died in their 50s from heart attacks in a row back in February, March. We don't know why. The Queensland Minister for Health said that apparently they're seeing a 40% increase in heart attacks. They don't know why. She openly said, we don't know why there's an increase in heart attacks in hospitals. We don't know why it's happening. Well, we do, but they don't. So yeah, it's Victoria, I think, just passed 3,000 deaths from COVID.
Okay.
That's it.
So and that's with the extreme serumized status, even there. But there's still an issue. Latanya King had an excellent. Oh, go ahead.
There's been an increase since the maintenance have dropped. There's been an increase in COVID cases in Western Australia, Victoria, and New South Wales, despite the maintenance being dropped. So after the election, they're going to put it straight back in place because there's more COVID.
Okay.
So we've had the election. People have voted now. Bring the mandates back in because there's an increase in COVID. So people are going to demand we bring back the mandates. As I said, I think I said last time I came on, we've literally had people calling for more tyranny from the government. People were saying, if you see someone breaking COVID restrictions, call the police, on your fellow citizens for breaking COVID restrictions. So we're going to see more and more calls for the mandates to be brought back after the election.
Do the folks?
Stasi tactics.
Yeah, it is. Do the folks there see a connection here? Basically, everyone's been serumized, yet people are still getting sick and dying from the beer flu.
The reason for that is the mask. The reason for that is people aren't wearing masks.
Okay.
The reason that people are dying is because people aren't wearing face diapers. People aren't wearing face diapers.
What was the primary beer serum manufacturer that was distributed in Australia? Was it Pfizer, Moderna?
Pfizer.
It was Pfizer. Have you seen the Pfizer dumps that have been coming out so far this year?
I haven't seen this latest one, but I did see the earlier ones.
Okay. I don't know how much we can talk about this on YouTube because this isn't a sensitive area for them. But there is a lot of incredibly damaging data that's resulted in state lawsuits against the CDC because Pfizer may have, actually told some fibs about not only the effectiveness of their serum, but the damage it was doing to certain people, particularly women who were pregnant. That's the really weird one that ended up in this last dump because they said it was safe for women who were pregnant. And clearly during the testing phase of this particular serum, it wasn't as safe as they had indicated. And they knew it.
You mean they did it again? I mean, you know how many lawsuits they have for falsifying records on studies and lying and paying people to say something that wasn't true? I mean, again, come on.
Yep. And yeah.
You don't ask the federal government to stop the federal government.
Yeah, that never really works for us, but it is interesting.
I like James Madison's point of view in Federalist 46. Refused to cooperate with officers of the Union.
Yeah. Yep, and that would include the CDC at this point, as far as we're concerned. What we're speaking of specifically is that there are individual states that are starting to sue parts of the federal government over the Pfizer serum because they lied, and you wouldn't know all about that unless you actually start reading the dumps. Now, I've got a question to ask you because I have a sneaking suspicion I know the answer. Is the mainstream media in Australia carrying the Pfizer dump data?
Surprisingly, no.
Okay. So the only way you can get it is the same as us, the alternative media. Did you notice there was a distraction here in America, and we're not going to talk about it tonight, but there was a big distraction having to do with the Supreme Court of the United States reversing a decision about Roe v. Wade. The same day the dumps came out. And every single time Pfizer has a data dump, it's a very large news cycle day here in the United States. Basically every time it happens, it's like clockwork. And so at any rate, that was a distraction for us here. Did you guys have any big news, or was the Roe v. Wade thing very big news there? Oh, election?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. You guys had election that day, or news about election?
It's the campaign right now, so people were busy with campaign-related news, so people weren't covering. There hasn't even been much coverage of the Roe v. Wade leak because people are too busy worrying about the election over here to worry about Roe v. Wade.
Yep.
Because as I said at the start, our elections are 6 weeks, like 8 to 20 months. So all that campaign's going to be really pressed in the 6 weeks.
Yep.
I think the long in 2016 we had an 8-week campaign, and that was seen as being long and tiring for 8 weeks. So everything gets condensed into 6 weeks. So it's a lot more intense than it is for say the US system. So that's what's like all people talking about in the news these days are the election.
Yep. Well, that's kind of the way I saw it too. You guys have to have a distraction there too. I didn't know Pfizer was the main distributor out there. I didn't know if it was Pfizer or Moderna or AstraZeneca. Those are the three, and Johnson and Johnson to a lesser extent.
Yeah, I heard it was. I heard it was Pfizer, and I know AstraZeneca actually did get in some trouble down there.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, with side effects.
Okay.
Originally we were using AZ, but then they had side effects, so we changed to Pfizer. Moderna, I think, is only being used if you can't get Pfizer. So when you have Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson hasn't been touched at all.
Okay. That's the one they were discouraging here in the United States. And that's the only one that's not in mRNA.
Actually, no, it's mod-RNA, which is the same thing, effectively. It's just synthetic versus lab-grown.
Yeah. So
it's the same thing.
Okay, gotcha.
It's damn, I can't say that on here. We'll have to, like I said, we'll have to talk after the show.
Yep. And I think I'm going to mention something here real quick here. I covered some stuff earlier, but I wanted you guys to know, let's see if I can get back to it. LibertyDownUnder is pretty prolific on Twitter. And I've got his Twitter link right down in the description section down below, so you can actually get him right on Twitter. He's pretty accessible on Twitter. And I imagine you probably end up doing interviews, basically all over the world, I think. Probably you probably got friends in Canada and in England and stuff that talk to you from time to time. But
yes.
And we appreciate having availability, your availability for us very much so. I know that if you were talking to anyone other than a gun group, you would probably say to anyone in America, don't give up your guns. Just look at the tyranny we're going through, and if we didn't do it. But at the same time, I think that what happened in Australia was extremely voluntary. And so I'm going to ask you a slightly more esoteric question. What do you think broke the will of the Aussies to actually want to get rid of their guns in the first place? How do you think that? What's the psychology behind that? I know that's a weird question. Go ahead.
I want to thank you for leading with that approach. I complain when people in the USA say it's because you guys don't have guns. That's why you have tyranny. Well, no, not having guns is a symptom, not the cause. The cause is the submissive mindset of Australians towards these measures. The cause isn't not having guns; it's the mindset behind it that leads to Australians giving up their guns. Because we haven't had to fight a war of independence like you guys. We haven't had to fight a war to protect ourselves like the British have.
Mm-hmm.
We've literally got our rights given to us by the British government in 1900, 1901. And then moving forward from there, it was always the rights came from the government. We haven't had to fight for anything. People take it for granted. No Bill of Rights federally either. We have a written constitution like you guys, but we don't have a written Bill of Rights like the UK. So we've gone half and half there. So people just take what we have for granted. So they're willing to give it away when the government says to. So that's why we had the guns taken away. That's why people accept the vaccine mandates. If we had guns today, the reason we'd be anti-mandate is because we wouldn't have that mindset that's behind giving the guns in the first place. So Australians getting guns today wouldn't itself stop the mandates. It'd show we have the mindset behind it to not submit to the mandates. That makes sense.
Okay, gotcha. And I knew that there was. Go ahead, Caleb.
I was going to say too that mindset too. It's indoctrinated. It's not just the idea of
public schools, and stuff like that.
Well, not just having. No, hang on, just not just the fact that you didn't have to fight for it, but also the fact that because it was just handed to them at that point in time by a government, all they know is that the government gives rights, when in reality, your rights are natural and inherent as a sovereign human being. I can read this little piece from the Declaration of Independence here. It says, "Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed." That is a basic piece of human psychology, is that if people are kept comfortable in their servitude, they won't rebel.
Bread and circuses. Like, for example, let's take that to the extreme, the argument of bread and circuses, right? So because we've had the mandates in place and lockdowns, the football teams have traveled from state to state based on where there is a COVID outbreak, so they can keep playing football. In Western Australia, they had to play the grand final for I think AFL. There's 3 different types of football over here, so I forgot. I'm not a sports person, so I forget which one it is. I think it was AFL, and it was 2 Melbourne teams that were playing in that game, and they held it in Western Australia. And Victorians blamed the Australian government for the games to be held in different states, rather than their own government for the mandates. So Victorians blamed the Liberal government at a federal level for the result of the state's decision, because the Liberal government didn't bring in federal quarantines. So that's the mindset thing that's right now. People calling for more lockdowns, and when the lockdowns have the consequences for the people, they blame anyone but their side, is what we're seeing in Australia.
Yep.
It's all part of the divide and conquer.
Yep. And Latanya King was referring to that too, Caleb, with what you talked about with natural law. So that's, it's an interesting point, and it's part of the Commonwealth, in Australia. And we even knew that what was going on in Australia was going to hit our neighbor to the north. We often refer to Canada as America's hat, that Canada was going to get hit as well. And they certainly did. And in large fashion. I mean, it was big news. I mean, the kind of tyranny they had going on up there with Trudeau. And of course, oh yeah. Yep. The trucker thing, the way he dealt with that with emergency powers, that was very interesting indeed, because that was not he says, a direct threat to, number one, our democracy. And he says a direct threat to our economy. Well, that's exactly what they did with the beer flu lockdowns. The government.
The whole point of the truckers shutting things down was to get the government on its knees, because they couldn't move anything.
Yep.
Bankrupt the government, undermine the system.
Yep.
It's exactly what's supposed to happen when people rebel, and on top of that, and other things I can't talk about in here.
Yep. And let's see. Ganai wants you to know something here, Liberty. Says that people are comfortable in Australia. The same thing is happening here in the States too. So it is happening, and it's other states go before others. So there are states, like, for instance, let's just say California and New York, where basically I mean, I can't call it anything other than tyranny in those states. It's awful. And
absolute despotism.
Yep. We have friends in both those states, friends to our channel. Go ahead.
I will say that when we're talking about each one of these states as a whole, the ones that are truly heading further into despotism are, you could say California, Washington, and New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that is because they are the ones. Oregon, I wouldn't put that quite in that category.
They have a permanent mask order there in Oregon.
The entire state?
I believe it's either the state or a city. I can't remember which, but it's permanent.
Yeah. I doubt that the surrounding area of that main capital, or at least a lot of it, is actually enforcing that garbage.
Yeah.
California's turn is a dumpster fire. It's going down the toilet. Same goes for Washington. Washington is a lost cause now. Now New York, statewide, still has a little bit of hope for the outlying areas, but the city of New York and Manhattan, they're screwed.
Yep. And we often refer to California as Little China, over here. It's just a little island of China's.
One of my exes used to call it behind the orange curtain.
Behind the orange. Yeah. And that's what we said about Australia before. We figured that China had a massive influence there due to trade, because they're your number one trading partner. And that's true here in the United States as well, by the way. They're our number one trading partner, unfortunately. It shouldn't have been that way, but that's the way that big business and politicians wanted it to be.
Differences were still armed.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the Midwest states, in the middle of the country, they're having no part of this. They know what's up, and they're ready for just about anything.
Yep. And so, as much as we hate what's going on in Australia, we have actually used the data coming out of Australia as kind of a warning. It's an early warning system for the West. And I hate that it had to be you guys. We love you guys. We love Australia. Shoot, man. Crocodile Dundee.
You guys can keep the giant spiders, though. Just saying.
Yeah, and the crocs.
We don't mind. We can keep those for you.
Yeah. Okay. And we're very, very sad, basically that's happened to you. But we've also considered it an early warning system for the rest of the West. And so we saw what tyranny you guys went through, especially when the government was literally forcing people out of their homes that hadn't received a serum, forcing them into camps. And then basically, if they couldn't make their house payments, oh, too bad, so sad, we're selling your house. The government takes the house, sells it, keeps the money, and said, that's on you because you didn't get that beer flu serum.
I'm surprised it didn't erect iron gates with the logo on the top that says "Die Vaccine macht frei."
Mm-hmm. But that's one thing in America where I think people would draw a hard line. If something like that happened in America, that's probably where the Second Amendment would come in very handy. People don't like having their property taken away. Okay, guys, opening it up. Anyone have any questions here for anything going on in Australia having to do with anything we talked about? Or any other questions you guys have? John?
Let's see.
Are you still reeling from the Nerf gun, problem over there?
It's still getting me.
I know. It's just, if just think about it for a second. I'm going to set the scene. A crate full of Nerf guns actually comes in through customs, and it's undeclared. I mean, just think of just the chaos that would ensue after that, and the investigations and everything,
I can just hear one of those whiny Australian officials saying, someone could get an eye taken out with one of these. One of these, we could have millions of people, one-eyed Australians running around. Got to do something about the Nerf guns. I'm going to shut my mic off and begin screaming at the top of my lungs because I cannot believe. I mean, I can. It's just the fact that I have heard a lot of things about gun laws in Australia. Now, I myself have not kept up on it like, others have, like you, Patrick. But I did realize it was ridiculous in nature. I mean, we compare our gun laws to countries like the UK and Australia and all that. I did not know about Nerf guns and paintball guns, and I feel like I'm in some kind. Dude, I'm not trying to make fun of you, but do you feel like there's a line that you cross, at least in government buildings, where they wear 2 watches for the normal time zone that you live in plus the twilight zone? Because it's like you're going through a membrane in these government buildings, and they come up with the weirdest freaking crap, the most tyrannical things they can think of. And then other people go, oh, gee, that sure sounds like a good idea. Yeah.
Yep. What about
I tell
knives? You guys probably have some really stringent knife laws in Australia as well. So is it like 1 inch? Anything over a 1 inch blade is not allowed to be carried around in public or something like that? So England has something like that.
Yes, I don't think it's that strict, but definitely that's not a knife. This is a knife scene. It wouldn't actually happen in Australia because we can't own those guns publicly, at least.
Holy mackerel! In Missouri, everyone knows that. That's not a knife. This is a knife. So yeah, we do a little bit of that around here. It's probably just as bad in other states.
And the funny thing is this is the ironic thing too. Missouri has some weird knife laws.
We do. They're actually kind of restrictive compared to gun.
They're technically, you can open carry in public whatever the hell you want. You can carry a damn katana on your back if you want, but they don't allow you to conceal anything more than what is it, like a 4-inch blade that's foldable, something like that.
I don't
No,
remember.
I have hardly ever seen it actually enforced. But people, it's just like people don't care because people just carry guns, not knives.
Hey, what's the longest blades you can have on a switchblade in Missouri?
Well, technically, you can own whatever switchblade you want, but you can't conceal it and carry it around because that's actually a federal offense. Unless you have one disabled arm, and that is the exemption.
M. Gabriel said something about gel blasters. Or gel blasters?
Yeah, I was talking about that earlier.
Are those illegal?
Gel blasters.
Go ahead,
In
Liberty.
some states, yes.
In some states?
Yeah.
Okay. Is the
They
state...
were only legalized, they were only in Queensland, they were only legalized 1 or 2 years ago, gel blasters.
Okay. In the state that you're in...
Illegal.
go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Are you allowed to play with pointed sticks?
Only if there are police around, yes.
What about pointed sticks that are placed in pits?
Yeah, no. Let's not go there. Let's not go there, Caleb.
No comment. No comment.
Yeah, you're breaking up. I can't hear what you're saying.
Hey, oh, there we go. Now it worked. My camera went out of focus.
Yep.
Pointed sticks and pits.
Yep. Okay.
I had to do it. It's a joke. It's a joke, YouTube.
Yep.
How about pointed sticks on the floor right below the windows?
Yeah. He, once again,
I
probably
gotta
can't
ask-
comment on that either.
Yeah, no comment. No comment.
So I wish I could remember the name of the gentleman. He was on the Tom Woods show last year. And I think he actually was in political office in Australia. He was, pretty much a libertarian. But at the time that he was being interviewed, he could not leave Australia. God, I wish I could remember his name because, he had a lot of wonderful insights too on. I think he was saying that he went from one side of Australia to the other, and then they had kind of loosened the restrictions, and then they tightened them back down. He actually wasn't allowed to cross the line back over and onto his side of Australia for a few months. They made him stay on the other side. He could not go home for a few months because the restrictions were that nutty. But I can't remember his name to save my life.
David
I
Lindbergh.
heard about that.
I'm gonna look it up real quick and see if I can.
Was it David Lindbergh?
I'm gonna look that up because I want to know the.
Because he did the rounds last year on US podcasts. Lindbergh. He's Lib Dems in Victoria. He's in Victoria Upper House right now. He's running for Victoria Senate federally as a senator from Victoria.
Yeah, David Lindbergh.
Yeah.
Yep, that's him. Yeah.
I got a quick question before you guys go forward here. This came from Latanya. She was asking, what can Americans do to help the Aussies? I understand if we had a conservative D.C. government right now, we'd probably have more influence over there. Right now, the influence
Send
is
money
bad.
for plane tickets.
Yeah, money and plane tickets. That's
Yep.
is that pretty? Is that
That's about it.
I'm thinking Caleb may be right on that. What say you, Liberty?
Hypothetically, dropping guns by helicopter in the middle of nowhere. Hypothetically, I'm not saying do that.
Yeah, hypothetically.
I can't say do that.
Hypothetical books for instructions on improvised munitions. Hypothetically.
Yeah, hypothetically, yes.
Yep. So let me ask you this: you guys have 3D printers out there, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's all I was going to ask.
Yeah.
All right. So, yep. But then there's other aspects of it too. The freedom seeds that could probably be really hard to get a hold of.
It's not really. There are ways.
Okay.
I will talk after the stream.
Okay, gotcha. After the stream, guys, and we're going to be closing this up here
within about
party. Within about
party.
Let's see, Triple T. By the way, 5 more minutes, gang. We're going to close off the stream, but we're going to stay in Discord for at least half an hour for those of you who want to ask more direct questions and avoid the YouTube algorithms of our friend from Australia if he has the time to stick with us a little bit longer when we're done live streaming. Triple T asks, Aussie most common cause of homicide victims: stab wound, 37% of deaths; blunt force, 19%; gunshot wounds, 13%. Other causes of death including strangulation, shaking, burns, and poisoning. So stabbing seems to be the number one, cause of violent activity in Australia. So. And of course, knives are strictly regulated out there, just like firearms are. So it seems to me that maybe the whole idea behind taking away firearms just didn't work. I mean, they just used something else. It just kind of seems that way. Yep. So
when you get rid of guns, they're replaced by cars and knives.
Cars and knives, that's right. So when you get rid of guns, you're not really changing the hearts of people that would do evil to other people, are you?
Yeah, you're trying to change. Sorry, the means, not the ends.
Yep, that's right. And let's see. Okay, yeah, Caleb's in the chat now. Okay, any more questions for Liberty on the live stream? We're going to end it here in just a few minutes. On YouTube, you guys let us know any questions you have for him. And of course, as soon as we shut off the live stream, we'll still be in our Discord. We just won't be live or on YouTube or recorded or anything anymore. So anyone can ask questions without worrying about the YouTube algorithms at that time.
Okay, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Would you seriously consider moving to the States?
It is an option, yes.
It's probably a better option than anywhere else in the Commonwealth world right now, and because they got pretty bad everywhere. England, Wales got bad, Scotland got horrible, Canada. The one I didn't follow was but New Guinea. What did they do? I didn't follow New Guinea at all.
There we go. Oh, let me give him.
I think they were pretty fine through COVID.
Okay.
So again, an island nation.
Okay.
And Indonesia, whose borders them, has a pretty strict COVID controls as well.
Okay.
So I don't think there's been many big COVID dramas in Papua New Guinea.
Gotcha. Okay, we need to help Aussies arm themselves. LOL. COA, of course, will. The CIA will get all the drugs into Australia. We just got to get them to carry some guns with them when they go in, I suppose. Yep. So, yep, we
got Charles in here now.
Hey there, Charles. Hey there,
you
buddy. Doing great, man. It's great to have you on the live stream. We're just about ready to wrap it up here. Triple T says home invasions and rape were up 37%, and they took the guns out of the people's hands. So home invasions and rape did continue to go up, despite the fact the guns were taken away when the politician says this is going to solve our home invasion and rape problem. And
that increase there, that was an increase before the guns were taken away. So before 96, 97, that increase, it was still going up beforehand. But getting rid of guns didn't make it go down or stop the increase.
Okay.
So
It
it's
just
not-
kept the same exponential growth as before.
Yep.
So the lack of guns isn't taking away the guns isn't the blame for the increase, but it didn't stop the increase.
Gotcha.
And it never will.
Yeah.
Yep.
No.
I mean, a perfect example would be Ireland. They had the strictest gun controls, surrounded on a segregated island with the entire British fleet around it, and yet Belfast from like 1960 to 1990 was far worse than any place in the world as far as to live, with gun crime. And I mean, there's literally war in the streets between civilians at that point. So gun control doesn't stop people from committing acts of violence or possessing them,
Mhm.
more or less.
It's still kind of base that they were yeeting what's the word I'm looking at? Yeeting the Brits over there too, though. So
Well, that's the point. You know, if people want to arm themselves, they're going to find a way to do it, illegally or not. I mean, that's just a given. It's not, I don't know, if people really want to arm themselves, they'll find a way. They'll make a gun at home. They'll find a way. There's no gun control that's actually going to be fully effective, other than making it slightly more difficult to do so. And if you want to talk about violence, I mean, let's look at Britain, for example. Yeah, they banned all the guns, and now they got mass stabbings.
And mass, running over people with vehicles. There's a
Yeah.
big one out there as
Yay,
well.
vehicular manslaughter.
Yeah.
Mass throwing acid in people's faces.
Making a homemade bomb. I mean, you can find that's been illegal in every nation, I'm pretty sure, but yet, why does this still happen? The society determines the peace of that area. If society wants to go completely into the Stone Age and go completely radical in a bad way, then it's going to lead to violence. And perfect example would be, just like I mentioned with the Irish, the Protestants and Catholics hated each other, did not want to live with each other, wanted to kill each other. There was nothing the British government could do to stop it.
Until 9/11 happened, and then it stopped really quick. So that was actually what ended that little 150-year skirmish out there.
Yeah.
So,
but in the end, only because they decided that enough was enough. Stop the killing.
Yep.
And then you got songs like "Zombie" by the Cranberries that was protesting, like, stop killing each other.
Hey, Charles, we got Ben in here too.
Oh,
the whole gang. Hey, there's Donkey. How you doing, buddy?
I'm sorry.
Good. How are you?
Okay. Hey, guys, I'm sorry, you guys. Going to end the live stream. We're going to stay here in Discord for a while, and there's a benefit and a bonus to that. For those of you in YouTube watching this right now, if you go ahead.
Yeah, Patrick, before you end it, it's just one thing I want to bring up real quick. I just looked at where JR 79 was passed out of committee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everybody voted for it. The only two that didn't were Searpoy and Roberts, and that's because they were absent. So all the Republicans voted for it, and Rizzo actually voted for this thing. And when I was talking to Senator Razor's office, they were saying that they were going to stop this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of weird that Rizzo would vote that thing out of committee.
Yep.
Well, maybe they're trying to get it on the floor so they can try to amend it. Maybe they want to try to get at least try to have enough time to get the 132 through with it on it.
Yeah.
No, man, I'm getting a bad vibe from this.
I am too.
Well,
everybody says it's bad in Australia. Hey, let me tell you something. They're trying to take our ballot initiative away right now.
Yep. Yep.
When that goes, what's next?
Yep.
It's a threat to them.
That'll be it, because we can't get nothing past Plocker.
Yep.
So he's got to go too.
Yep. And I did say at the beginning of this for people to continue emailing and calling their senators. Look in the description section down below in the video. You have all the information you need to continue contacting your senators about this very important issue. And they've been somewhat receptive. I recommend a phone call before an email when it comes to these senators. It seems to be a little more effective. So please do continue. And by the way, I have continued as well. I have not stopped. So please do continue calling. That's the last thing basically on our list for the year is just shutting down HJR 79 or replacing the language in HJR 79 with the language from HJR 132. That would be acceptable as well. So, but yeah, that's still a problem. We're still, it's on the informal calendar. It can come up at any time in the Senate, anytime. So, and then also just to remind you guys one more time about the expo. This would be Travis's Prepared Homestead Expo, which is May 26th and 27th. We will definitely be there. We'll be there for the entire expo, the Missouri Freedom Initiative. And I'm sorry.
Going up too.
Oh, you're going, Charles?
I plan.
Yeah,
Awesome. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We haven't had any other questions come in. I want to thank everyone from YouTube for watching this and actually sending in those interesting questions. And I especially want to thank our guest, Liberty Down Under, for making time for us to talk to us. Basically about the tyranny that's been going on in Australia, what they've been trying to do about it, what the politics are, what the status of the politics are, and the status of the mandates. And he answered, very thoroughly every question tonight. And we're very grateful that you made time for us. And hopefully you can stay with us, just a little bit longer here as we end the live stream so people can ask more direct questions without worrying about YouTube algorithms, if that's okay. So
I do have to rush off straight away. Sorry, after we finish up.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you, everyone on Discord, for participating in this. You guys, thank you once again. We'll see you on Sunday night, regular time at 7:30. May God bless each and every one of you, and thank you for joining us tonight. Take care, gang.